Hey guys, welcome back to the Casual NBA Fanatic podcast. Here, we are just going to be breaking down one of the premier contenders in the NBA over the past 2 years and basically just our season preview. Just a franchise who has hosted one of the most exciting future talents in basketball, a future apex predator of a scoring machine who does fit the mold for future contention. And by that description alone, it's pretty clear that I am talking about the Minnesota Timberwolves. Obviously, a team last season who we saw claim their second conference finals appearance in a row, losing to a different rival being the Oklahoma City Thunder in a 5-game slate, where for the most part they were pretty ripped apart in multiple of those matchups. But before we do get to that OKC series, the Timberwolves obviously proved just how strong that they can really be, flexing their physicality throughout their current roster identity at the moment, whilst also having the requisite offensive firepower to combat the beasts of the West, taking down both LA in comfortable fashion, but is also eliminating the Curryless Warriors in 5 games. And throughout all of last playoffs, we just saw how polished this Wolves team really is, just harnessing a balance between physical grit and polished process, and that is what makes this team extremely special and really why they were able to replicate much of their success in that second season, even though we saw a Cat and Julius Randle trade that does mess with a lot of chemistry. Offensively, we saw the Wolves impose this sort of mismatch attacking, style of offense just so pristinely, just being able to punish LA in particular, just so ruthlessly, even looking towards a guy like Jaden McDaniels as their second source for isolation scoring for multiple games in that series. Just the actual fundamentals backed behind Chris Finch's system, just so heavily emphasized here around actually flexing and taking advantage of the gifts that you do have in a matchup. And for the Wolves, that meant brutal mismatch hunting, all-out aggressive intensity on the glass, just all-out on-ball pressure as well, and just exceptional use of the pure length between their positions to disrupt offensive quality for that Lakers team. And against LA, we just saw the peak of Timberwolves basketball from last year. We saw Anthony Edwards totally unafraid of the matchup against both LeBron and Luka. And this matchup in particular was the biggest illustration of ruthless hunting, with the Wolves relentlessly ripping apart Luka's overall value on the floor, deterring everything that he gave the Lakers offensively, but just fully destroying the lack of conditioned lateral competitiveness. We talk about Jaden McDaniels. He was having an absolute field day that series, attacking with his knifing and agile frame for those driving lanes and using his elevation advantages to get those easy and unaffected close range jumpers all series long. And with the array of weak points in that LA unit, you got Luka, Austin Reeves, Jackson Hayes, and Rui Hachimura. For the Wolves, it was absolutely easy pickings for their offensive cast to get comfortable prior to their next series, which was that Warriors series. And that was more of a breeze more than anything. Obviously Steph goes down and the Warriors just are purely reliant on just their pristine offensive process to try and win them any sort of games in that series. Jimmy was pretty unaggressive besides that Game 3 performance. And, the Warriors just simply didn't have the literal firepower to compete with that Timberwolves squad. There's only really so much that a Warriors team could do, just running, Brandon Pajemski DHOs with Draymond Green as the screening threat, especially an aged Draymond Green whose shot touch did relatively leave him, especially come playoff time. But for the Wolves part, that series just showed just how dominant Anthony Edwards can be at willing his teams to victory with the consistent scoring aggression that he brings to the game. And Julius Randle individually was absolutely exceptional in that series as well. And overall, with Steph's Game 1 injury, I think it was a pretty major mismatch of talent. But what those first 2 series kind of told us about the Timberwolves was that their style of brute force basketball was extremely compatible for the playoff environment, especially through Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle. Through those guys just being able to create the most spot-up possessions as well in the playoffs out of any team on average, just giving their already talented role guys just some supreme advantages to offer to a sufficient offense as well. Just being able to, actually thrive in that drive and kick style of offense as well. Just brutally impactful athletes who actually could instill their physical presence on the game and actually create those looks for their surrounding cast. Defensively, this is kind of just where we saw the team really shine and where they ultimately gave themselves the cushion to have frequent dips in offensive success. I mean, defensively, this was a team that was mauling ball handlers with length and intense motors that they could throw at the best ball handlers in our game. Obviously we saw OKC fizzle out Minnesota in 5 games, but there were multiple decent stretches, even in that series, where the Wolves completely checked out SGA's production and impact for multiple different stretches of games. And a big portion of this was really just their balance between veteran experience and youthful exuberance, where their energy and their competitive fire just drives their intense mindset. And really, when your best player is giving you very decent, locked-in ball pressure possessions at the point of attack in Anthony Edwards, it just gives everyone this belief and motivation to go into battle and give it everything to win extra possessions each game. And by forcing, the 4th most turnovers and regularly damaging opposing teams on the glass, Minnesota just gave themselves so much room for error in that series, leading to their second conference finals appearance with the right to acknowledge themselves as a top 4 team in basketball. In terms of the identity, it's pretty clear. They're just a super talented roster with the level of physical mobility that they have across the roster. Just absolutely an array of unique bodies who typically have inherent advantages between multiple matchups. We just saw how talented Jaden McDaniels can be when, close out attacking and using that agile frame to knife for those tight angles. We see just how incredibly explosive and unpredictable Anthony Edwards can be as a perimeter driver. We know how physically imposing Julius Randle can be with the brutal weight distribution and those footwork counters. And then even flipping to guys like Naz Reid and Rudy Gobert, guys who can give you advantageous traits against multiple matchups. Obviously, yes, they have so much already established skill, but for me, I just think it's more to do with the natural talent that their individual builds already give them. Obviously, we're talking about the length and mobility advantages basically all across the board. And that does feed into their defensive strengths as well. And that really is the beauty about this Timberwolves team and why they are one of the most matchup resilient teams in basketball and why they did prove to be able to make another consecutive deep playoff run. Now, obviously, this team's identity is nowhere near where it is now without Anthony Edwards. You got to have that apex predator, that franchise leader to give you any sort of shot to be able to make these consecutive runs year by year. And in terms of the leading aspect that allows this Wolves team to be matchup resilient, I think it really just starts with Anthony Edwards leading their offensive charge. In terms of giving you your designated superstar role, just having a guy who can willingly give you elite isolation value, weaponizing both elite skill and athleticism. It's just such a luxury for your franchise to be able to fall back on. And there aren't many more matchup resilient playstyles than that blend of elite scoring mastery itself. Last year, we saw another growth year for Anthony Edwards, and really the story revolved around the 3-point surge. Last year, we saw Edwards climb up nearly 4% on his threes, shooting 40% on over 10 attempts a game, leading the league in both threes made and attempted, just really leaning on them for regular season maintenance and preserving that energy as well, and allowing him to play the full 82 and impact the team throughout the NBA calendar. And then obviously with the extra, portion of threes that he is taking, just adding to that trait just really gives him more of a heightened runway as a driver when he can extensively leverage that threatening jumper with those unguardable hesitation dribbles that he likes to offer his defenders. Edwards himself, just unbelievable elevation and over-the-top advantages that allow him to use these at a consistent level. Obviously in the playoffs, Edwards was far from destructively great in terms of the threes, but he was certainly strong enough across the board as this dominant scoring archetype. Last season in the playoffs, we saw 25, 8, and 5 on a very respectable 53% effective field goal percentage. And just one thing I just hope for Anthony Edwards going forward is that there is less reliance on the perimeter shot-making piece to the degree that we've seen over the start of his career so far. Being the apex athlete that he is, just rim pressure itself should just be the primary objective with each possession, especially in these playoff environments. And in terms of the settling piece, being able to bail out defenses come playoff time, that just goes against playoff principles for someone as gifted as Ant at the moment. Obviously, he did dial down the rate of threes in his playoff run, but just still some of those tendencies of those early shot clock threes, they can frequently stall out offensive flow and offensive momentum, which can be pivotal in certain stretches of certain games. But overall, this is a minor knock on Ant's talent overall and his playstyle. I mean, he's only 24 years old and he is still refining his scoring arsenal and just learning new skills and shot touch that will carve out what may be the most pristine scoring talent of all time. When it's all said and done, I mean, this guy actually has the ability with the athletic weaponization as well and with the skill development, especially now beyond the three, to improve this aggregate efficiency level at that two guard position. And he is one of the greatest scoring talents that we've ever seen with what he is doing right now and what he's aiming to build out for himself in the future with this skill set. Obviously, we can always ask more from the passing and the consistent advantage creation mindset, but this guy just has great fundamentals down pat for his archetype as a scoring two guard. And the total scoring repertoire already established at his age, I mean, it just makes him one of the clear best franchise-altering prospects in recent history, and especially for the full 82-plus playoffs. I mean, Edwards is just one of the best focal points to choose for heading into 2026, and I expect him to be at his absolute best self and a newer and more refined version year in, year out, till he hits maybe age 27. And that is extremely exciting for Minnesota to be able to bank on to get that natural progression year by year. Obviously, besides Ant, the Wolves do have a pretty strong foundation surrounding him. A big question for me for going into next season is just how effective will Jaden McDaniels be able to be? You know, obviously an exceptional back end towards last season. Obviously, there is a big question to where McDaniels can take his game offensively and if there is real merit for the Wolves to really invest in his growth. I mean, in terms of his role, if Jaden can replicate his performance from that postseason, he will become one of the best role-playing stars in basketball. In total, there aren't many guys who can provide those length and size tools to an effective manner offensively in terms of the off-the-dribble stuff. I mean, Jaden, he's just such a rare build, and someone that can provide that hybrid impact, being able to hunt more efficient looks. And that does offer more insight into what Jaden can blossom into in this role. Last playoffs, McDaniels shot 75% in the restricted area, 65% on layups, and 47% in that paint non-restricted area, providing real tertiary juice at 15 points and 6 rebounds a game on 58% effective field goal percentage. This was mostly in that narrow role of closeout attacking itself, just someone who was able to pit stop, rise, and elevate over those weaker athletes like we talked about with Luka, and also just weaponizing the long strides and that lengthy release at the rim in transition as well. And so in terms of like the actual scoring juice, he gave the Wolves a ton of work on the margins and just really blended quite beautifully in that system, revolving around high-dose, isolation-heavy basketball. To me, I just think next to Anthony Edwards, Jaden is someone who may fly fairly under the radar, just not a huge name by any means yet, but someone who will no doubt flourish next year. And to be honest, I would expect to see a 16.6 rebound stat line whilst being the dependable defender that he has always been as that professional space invader and screen navigator. And when we're talking about the defensive role for McDaniels and what he means for the Wolves' contention potential, he is a decent build to offer decent level resistance against many of those point of attack assignments in the West top. You know, he has the length, he has the space coverage tools to actually disturb some of the best perimeter creators in basketball, like your SGAs, like your Kevin Durant's for Houston now. And there aren't really many guys in the league that can actually do this to the level that Jaden can. I mean, we talk about the actual toughness that he brings to the game. We talk about the competitive fire to continue to harass these elite ball handlers. And even against like a Jamal Murray and a Luka, I mean, just the ability to beat them to spots and having that intensity to fight against their physical separation, it just makes Jaden a very, very safe option as that primary perimeter stopper in that starting unit, just doing the bulk work, limiting advantages. And I just think Jaden McDaniels is just such a core piece to what the Timberwolves have had to build. And then pivoting from him, I mean, when you're evaluating the other surrounding guys like Julius Randle, like Rudy Gobert, Naz Reid, I mean, just the Wolves overall just throw out such reliable mobility on the floor and a multitude of looks that they can look to for stable impact. I mean, you talk about your Rudy Gobert minutes and you're still getting an elite defensive anchor with Rudy on the floor. Just exceptional principles, exceptional positioning, immense backline communication as well. And though offensively, Rudy can struggle from time to time to find his footing, that sort of physical athleticism and just the frame itself is just such a luxury to have in your drop coverage with that 7'9" wingspan and impeccable discipline. But I mean, in those spots when Rudy also does struggle to find his place, we've seen the Wolves being able to lean onto Naz Reid extremely heavily in those 5-man minutes. Just someone who can provide surging offensive minutes, someone who can provide another plus driving talent with his pretty refined touch, length, and strides. Next to Ant and Julius Randle, we talk about the need for closeout, high-level closeout attacking around Julius and Anthony Edwards. I mean, Naz Reid just adds to that so immensely. Basically, between the front line, I mean, for the Wolves, I mean, they just have real excellent level of depth and coherence between their three frontline options. We're just staggering the minutes does become an easy task, and this ultimately gives them this playoff resilience as well in itself. And with Randle as well on the other side, I mean, obviously it was a pretty embarrassing conference finals that we did see, but prior to that, I mean, we haven't seen Randle ever be so dominant in a playoff setting, just playing so efficient, so effective, just so brutal physical basketball, just adding to that identity. I mean, in those two series before the conference finals, Julius was averaging 24, 6, and 6. And so prior to the OKC meltdown, which, to be fair, I mean, you're going up against the most talented array of ball pressure of all time. Prior to that, I mean, you were getting supreme second option offensive scoring out of Julius. And with Julius, I mean, he's just so talented with that mobility package. He's actually quite unique in that front where he actually has a very defined shot arsenal as well with really convincing shot touch, but also just the ability to create comfortable separation with that push-off power, with the balance frame, the overpowering shoulder distribution, the jab step coordination. It just makes him so immensely special as a playoff environment, possession-based shot hunter in theory. And on the margins in terms of the actual roster as well, I know you also lost Nickeil Alexander-Walker, but in terms of like the role-playing cast, it's just so loaded with versatile two-way guys. Like mentioned before, they still have Jaden McDaniels and Rudy Gobert who do fall into this mold, but you still have Dante DiVincenzo, you still have Mike Conley, Jalen Clark, Terrence Shannon Jr., and possible additions to the rotation with maybe a guy like Rob Dillingham who might be able to crack minutes, and especially with your rookie Joanne Berger, if I'm saying his name right. And you also have Leonard Miller as well, who more than fits this mold of talented mobility and high motor athletes. And so overall, when you are looking at the roster for Minnesota heading into next season, they do look particularly strong for another postseason run. I mean, they've just got enough top-end talent and enough translatable advantages to go into another playoff run with real confidence. And, I mean, they have the youth as well, but they also just have the veteran leadership. And not many teams do blend that the way that Minnesota currently do with their current roster construction. And they should be applauded for the way they have constructed this roster around Anthony Edwards, even after pivoting from Karl Anthony Towns. In terms of the biggest competitors for Minnesota heading into next season, I mean, when you are projecting the ceiling for the Timberwolves next season, you kind of have to compare them with their Western Conference rivals, which do consist of the top-end teams like OKC, Houston, and Denver, who do seem like the juggernauts of the West by talent and by last season's performances. To me, the Wolves should be pretty encouraged by their matchup with both Denver and Houston. I mean, they've got a huge fighting chance to be competitive in both those series. First off, with the Denver matchup, I think Minnesota have proven over multiple years of their ability to disturb the Nuggets' offensive flow and provide very valuable resistance towards Nikola Jokic, just with the array of bigs that they can throw at him, with also just the stunting help of their perimeter wings who just provide so much length and timing on their help. I mean, just being able to actually halt that physical attack as well from Nikola Jokic, just the Wolves can provide continuous incoming help where the Wolves can also more than capably switch and rotate out of Jokic's passing as well. Obviously, the arrivals of Cam Johnson and Hardaway Jr. and also the exit of Russell Westbrook does maximize the passing gifts of a Nikola Jokic with maximized spacing. But from what we just saw from that OKC Thunder squad, I mean, teams who do have pure speed advantages like what OKC did and like what Minnesota might be able to do next year, I mean, they can orchestrate capable defensive coverages to limit Denver's resilient attack. Now, realistically, you aren't going to deter the Nuggets offense completely. They just got so many weapons and they have just such a rehearsed offensive system and flow, but In terms of the amount of easy offensive opportunities for Anthony Edwards to select and dissect on the other end, I just think the Minnesota it's pretty convincing. It's a pretty convincing matchup for them to be more than competitive if they can hit their intensifying surge of momentum that they did towards the second half of the regular season. Houston, on the other hand, actually come as a pretty fun matchup as well against Minnesota. Similar to Jokic, the Wolves no doubt can handle the post pressure and the cutting movement between much of that Rockets core, just with their own size, their own motor, and their own willpower that they'll be able to combat with. And to me, I would love to watch a Houston-Minnesota series. I mean, I just think that would be must-see TV for the NBA. Just the two most ferocious teams just battling for every inch and turning a 7-game battle into a fight for possession volume off the glass through defensive pressure and just through physical shot hunting for a majority of the lineup. For me, though, the Wolves just have a noticeable skill advantage offensively. Yes, this obviously isn't the same Wolves team as last year. I know they have Kevin Durant, especially now, which does make them astronomically better and a much tougher team to compete against, just with the space and perimeter skill alleviation that he brings. But with the Wolves, I mean, they just have much more capable pull-up shooting still throughout the roster that should help them, at least outlast a foreseeable war with Houston. Obviously, the Rockets have tons of not just intense high-motor athletes, but also elite recovery defenders that do provide luxurious impact, not just in pick and roll, but also when covering and swarming the space separation strengths of both Ant and Julius. I think in a series like that, Ant and Julius themselves will just find it generally hard attaining those comfortable release points against a point of attack line that does have Amon Thompson, KD, Tyrese, and Jabari Smith. But in saying that, this Houston team is prioritizing offensive skill much more this season, and it is still in question whether Reed Shepherd or Jabari will get that solidified starting role by the end of the season. And especially with just how stable we saw Reed Shepherd last season defensively and how effective his shooting strengths may present to be compared to what Jabari brings and the size that he brings to the table. But I mean, regardless of the starting units, Minnesota just have an exceptional chance in a series against Houston, just continuing their ISO-heavy and extreme mismatch hunting structure. And I think they'll be able to beat Houston in a 7-game series as currently constructed. But apart from these projected juggernauts, I just think Minnesota, I don't think they've solved enough issues. And I still think they'll have to face probably the best team in basketball, still the reigning champs. And the team that they did get smacked against in the Oklahoma City Thunder, who are relying on natural talent progression as their competitive upgrade, most particularly through Chet and J-Dub, who did still show that they have more comfortable room to grow. Now, for Minnesota, losing Nickeil Alexander-Walker is a really rough loss for this matchup. I mean, in a series where two-way bench firepower was a major asset, I mean, just giving Minnesota any life in that OKC series, just allowing him to win games on the margins and instill that physical pressure, even when the starting unit was visibly gassed with OKC's continuous drive and transition attack. And as far as someone who can give SGA fits, I mean, Nickeil was one of the best options around the league. But looking towards Jalen Clark and towards this next season, just more heavily to be able to pick up some of that defensive load will be a major factor for Minnesota if they want to compete with an OKC matchup again. Obviously, there is a huge offensive gap between the two. But Jalen Clark, I mean, don't forget about him. I mean, he plays with a sort of urging confidence where hopefully we can see him actually produce as a spot-up jump shooter on real volume. Last season, Jalen Clark shot 43% from three last year in 40 games, albeit only 1.3 looks per game. But still, just with the amount of talent that still exists on that OKC roster, Ant and Julius's loads and tough matchups might still just be too much to overcome just yet. I mean, unless we do see Ant turn into this megastar half-court surgeon similar to that of what we saw from SGA as far as the efficiency and reliability. But to me, there is still a large gap between both Ant and SGA, and that is still hard to see changing tides just within the next 12 months alone. And also just don't think that the front line for Minnesota can really do too much to disrupt SGA at this point. I mean, Rudy still today is one of the most perfected drop coverage defenders in basketball, but SGA is a different animal just as far as that over-the-top contested shot-making piece from the intermediate range goes. And therefore, I mean, some real switching with Rudy might be a more effective avenue to limit the advantage creation of SGA working with a given advantage anyways. And Obviously SGA also is someone that has questionable three-point stretches. I mean, it may be worthy to rely on Rudy's lateral strength and balance, with the severe backline help as well, to be able to test SGA's decision-making even more if he actually has to take on that Rudy one-on-one, because there really aren't any weaknesses in SGA's individual scoring game as it is. I mean, but with Ant's progression going to next season, I do think Minnesota can really knock off anyone, just with some more growth steps from the other guys and getting more improvements and more cohesiveness across the roster. They do have a ton of offensive skill to offer to any team. And so basically for Minnesota's potential next year, I do have them in that top 4 range for sure. Not as much for the regular season, but as competitors come playoff time in that Western Conference, they should be comfortably one of the best teams considered in that realm. I do believe in their apex talent, and I believe in their star foundation. I believe in their depth, their identity. And though I don't look at them as a certified top-tier championship contender, they are very close on that top 5 spot amongst the entire league. Just with health on their side as well, and a real asserted effort to secure that home court advantage in the playoffs, I could see the Wolves going 52 to 54 wins next year, especially if they can run back some of that all-time defensive cohesiveness throughout their roster like they had a few years ago. I also just think this is the year that Anthony Edwards does make first-team All-NBA and does really contend in that MVP race. I do think voters are relatively sick of the recent big three between SGA, Jokic, Giannis in these award voting, and with Giannis in a pretty poor situation, I think we'll see Ant receive real praise in this conversation and have a real chance to lead a regular season juggernaut with the elite scoring level that he has now hit. I just believe in what we saw from Julius as well. I mean, it may turn out to be false, but theoretically he is a suited playoff performer just with the physical shot hunting and the added range to his game. And overall, I love this Wolves squad and what they've achieved and the potential to build on that success as well, posing a threat to any team in that tough Western Conference. And I think next year will be a massive year for Minnesota basketball. And with that, I appreciate you guys for listening. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that, and I'll be back with some more content in the coming days.